This is Cydni.
And I'm Sher. And each week we get together to share with you a message of hope.
It is through our own study and our personal experiences that we offer the reminder to not only seek the light,
but be the light. You can find peace, and there is hope.
And as long as one of us is slightly caffeinated, there will be laughter.
Today's episode is Miracles.
And we're so glad you're here.
I'm forging my way through the tip top. I'm living my life through the drip drop. When he turns.
All right, Cydni, today we're going to talk about miracles. So what is a miracle?
Let's talk about the most recent miracle of my life.
You being here on time?
I was late. That's funny.
Thanks.
All right, we were in Florida, and Ben and I said to our children, guess what, guys? We're going to Harry Potter World, because who doesn't want to go to Harry Potter World? We love Harry Potter in our home. Not enough to read the books, but enough to watch the movies. We told them, and we were excited. And our kids said, could we not go to Harry Potter World? That's a miracle.
But were they asking for something bigger?
No, they were not. They said, could we please not stand in line with like tons of people? Could we please just go somewhere a little bit more calm, less expensive? They didn't say that, but it is like anywhere is less expensive. So we went kayaking in Mother Nature's world as a family, and it was beautiful and amazing. And I cannot get over that they had the option of going to Harry Potter World, and they chose kayaking.
That is a miracle. And congratulations on that miracle.
Thank you. I am still reflecting on it daily.
I would be too. That's really cool.
It was way cool. We saw alligator in arm's reach. A little turtle swam by Titus right up to his kayak.
Oh, that's super cool.
I know.
And super fun. Way to go, kids. Good
I was really
choices.
proud of them.
Yeah.
I was a little disappointed at first because I was like, Harry Potter World. There's a dragon that blows fire. But no, they picked that. So I think that after that, anything is possible, Sher.
I believe that.
But I was looking up, so, my YouTube style of study, I did notice something that I was very excited to share with you. So when I first started looking up miracles, I noticed in the algorithm that the title would say miracles from God. All of them. It's just like real life miracle from God in the Bible. It always had miracle from God. Then the algorithm changed and it started to take God's name off and just say miracles. But then I noticed it was moving from miracles to coincidences, to synchronicities, to then the last one I saw was everyday serendipity. Isn't that interesting?
That is interesting and a little heartbreaking.
And then the last one was join Satan's church today.
No, wait, it said that?
It did.
I knew it was going in that direction.
Ad free. First year free.
What a good deal. I'll sign up now.
So I did notice that it did go from miracles from God to then everyday serendipity. I thought that was really interesting. It's like, what are you doing over there, algorithm?
Mm-hmm.
What are you trying to do?
It's trying to ruin our society, our culture, and our souls.
Right.
That's all.
We're not going to fall for that. But I looked up the definitions between the first and then the last one that I saw. So I'll share that with you. A miracle is an extraordinary event caused by the power of God. But then here's serendipity. Serendipity is the occurrence of events by chance in a happy or beneficial way. I just thought this is interesting because in the Bible, in our own personal lives, I feel like it's so obvious that God is in the miracle, in the moment. We know there's no way that this would have happened without there being a power greater than us all. But it's so easy to slowly move through our own personal algorithm to just like, well, that was a crazy coincidence, and look at that serendipity. I just thought it was interesting. Take with that what you will.
Thank you. It is really easy to do that because we don't think about everyday miracles because maybe we don't notice or we don't see it or we're just not paying attention. We don't notice those little miracles that happen to us every day. We're just thinking, oh, that was lucky. I'm glad that worked out well. But we don't realize that that is the miracle.
So to answer your question one more time, I took the long way, as usual. But a miracle is an extraordinary event caused by the power of God.
And I love that definition. So this takes us to our next question, which is, what is your favorite miracle that's found in the scriptures? I was just thinking about this, and I found this list that I thought was really super interesting. It was created by Dr. Wilford Graves. He made a list of all the miracles in the Old Testament. It's not counting the New Testament, it's Old Testament only. And there are 87 miracles found just in the Old Testament alone, which really made me think, what else does the Lord need to do? We have miracles in the Old Testament and New Testament. And if you reflect upon your own life, just lists and lists of how God has intervened or how he's caused extraordinary events in our lives. And what else does he need to do? You either are going to choose to see the miracles or you're not. We're either going to choose to see the miracle or the serendipity. Which one are you choosing?
I wonder what that 88th would be, though. What if that was the kicker? Like you were on the fence and then the 88th happened. You're like, okay, I believe.
If I only had 90 miracles, then I'd be in.
I'd believe then.
Yeah.
I think that we're not supposed to think that way. We're supposed to just be like, that first one was good.
That is what we're supposed to do. So I was reflecting on what is my favorite miracle in the scriptures. And I don't know why, but I really, really like the story of Jericho. And I don't know if it's because I like the song, Joshua Fought the Battle of Jericho. I don't know if that's why, or if it's that I just don't understand how the miracle worked. Like, it's so different. I looked it up because I wanted to make sure I was getting the miracle right in my head. And I found a kid version of the miracle, which I'm going to read because then we'll all understand it. The city, Jericho, was very strong and had high walls. The Lord told Joshua how to conquer Jericho. He said that the Israelites should march around Jericho every day for 6 days. Joshua obeyed the Lord. Joshua told the priests to carry the Ark of the Covenant in front of the Israelites. Each day the army marched around Jericho and 7 priests blew their horns. All the other Israelites were silent. On the 7th day, the army marched around Jericho 7 times as the priests blew their horns. Joshua told the Israelites to shout. Suddenly, Jericho's walls fell to the ground and Joshua's army took the city. Just think about that. You're marching around every single day for 7 days, and I'm sure the people were on the walls of the city making fun of them. They had to be mocking and saying, you guys are idiots. What are you doing? Because they weren't attacking. They're just marching around in a circle and the priests are blowing a horn. And then the 7th day, look what's happening now. Who has the last laugh? I was always intrigued by that miracle because it's just weird to me.
Yeah, I feel like no matter whose side you're on there, you're like, why are we walking around this building? Or why are they walking around this building? Or what if there was another route, but God thought it would be funny?
Yeah, like you could have gone in through the back door, but I'm going to have you march around the city wall instead. I don't know.
Just humor.
Yeah. It might be. Okay. But I think I like that one because it's just a little different and weird and crazy that the walls just came tumbling down. But my favorite miracle.
Can I just interrupt? Because what I thought of is if you guys see Cher walking around your house 7 times, just know her faith is next level that day.
That's
She's trying
right.
to cause issues.
Walls tumbling down of your house.
Like, I'm a believer. She's got her trumpet.
You better
She's
watch
like,
out.
You're going to take my Mel.
I have a clarinet. I'll take my clarinet and blow it.
Everyone will be laughing till the house falls.
Yeah. All right. My absolutely favorite one, though, is I'm going to count it as a miracle, is when the Pharisees brought the woman that was caught in adultery to Jesus. And the reason I'm counting it as a miracle is because Jesus knew the thoughts of the Pharisees and he understood that it was a trap. But instead, the Savior, he showed love to the sinner. And I just have so many questions about this whole story. Like, there's so many questions that I could just keep going over and over, because the first question I have is, where's the guy? Because it was saying she was caught in the act. So where's the guy? You just bring the woman?
I never thought about that.
Oh, it drives me crazy every time I read it. And it always made me wonder. I wonder if it was one of the Pharisees.
Oh, I bet it was, or their son.
Yes.
They're protecting their son.
Mm-hmm.
Just like them.
Yep. And then the other thing is, did they trap her? What did they
set it up?
Yeah. So did they set up this lady and then they were like, got you. And then what they did to humiliate and shame her, it always just makes me sick, because somebody knew. One of the Pharisees was in on this, at least one, and it makes me really sick. And then the other thing, what did Jesus write in the sand? And you brought up the idea that maybe it was the Pharisees' names or little sins they had committed.
Yeah, that was from a preacher I'd once found on YouTube, my oldest son, and I love this theory that Jesus, because nobody knows what he wrote in the sand, but whatever it was, it made those men be real quiet, real fast. So Rock and I love to talk about this idea that what he probably was writing was some key words that brought up some maybe sins of the men that were there. Just a little bit of a, I know where you were last summer.
Right.
Like something like, hey, Michael, does 3 a.m. on Tuesday ring a bell? Just like enough information for that one person to be like, okay, I'm going to back out slowly. I'm going to erase the sand real quick and run. So we love to think about like the theory that we all have brought to us by this preacher was, what if it was something that called them out that nobody else knew and they had all the reason in the world to shut it and get out and not throw a stone because maybe it was a little bit worse. Or maybe it was what you're saying. Maybe it was like, hey, you're part of this, bro.
Yeah, it could be like, I know how you set this all up and I'm going to start writing it in the sand.
We will bring conspiracies to the Bible. We're not afraid.
Yeah, darn right. And I like that idea because then as he's writing things in the sand, maybe they're like, ooh, I'm going to sneak out now. Then Jesus says to the woman, where are thy accusers? And they're not there anymore.
Yeah, they're out cleaning up crime scenes is where they are. Like, how did he know about that? It was a clean, done deal.
But I love the ultimate miracle, which is Christ forgiving her. His atonement and sacrificing himself. It is so beautiful, and I can never repay that back. And he did that for each and every one of us. That whole scene is how he took something so awful and horrible and he turned it into something so beautiful. And that's what Christ does over and over and over again. And that's the miracle to me. What about you?
I loved that. I immediately thought of two things, just the idea of Christ turning water to wine, but also that he multiplied bread at a time. And I thought, if you wonder, does Jesus Christ love women? Well, my friend, he sure turned water into wine and he sure put out a lot of carbs out there. So yes, the answer is yes, he does. I've always loved those two miracles just for the sake of carbs and wine.
We know what Cydni does on weekends now.
I don't do wine.
Oh.
Well, when it comes to favorite miracles, I love all of the stories, but a couple months ago, and I may have shared this before, we asked the kids what their favorite miracles were. And I often reflect on Titus's answer. He said that it was the miracle of the woman with an issue of blood. And she just knew that if she could touch Christ's robe, it would be enough and she would be healed. And then he turned and he noticed that she had done that. So we asked Titus, why is that one your favorite? He said, because he has had stomach issues for a couple of years with his celiac, and he knows what it feels like to be in pain with no answers. And that miracle was so personal to him. It just gave him hope that he could be healed too. And I thought, isn't that the purpose of miracles, is to testify of the power of God? And that story did that for Titus. And I've spent a lot of time reflecting on that beautiful answer.
That is a beautiful answer. And I love that story. How old is Titus?
He's 11.
And that is amazing that he picked up on that at 11. That is a miracle in itself.
In our home, you betcha. It is a miracle. But I have always loved all of Moses' story. And I recently was listening to Morgan Freeman interviewed a Jewish family while they sat down for the Passover. And I learned some interesting things. But I was wondering, can you off the top of your head remember the plagues? Because Iana can list them all.
She can?
Yeah.
How old is she?
She is 8. But it's not like, oh, sweet. She's obsessed with like the violence.
I probably won't remember all of them, but the angel of death.
Right to the powerful one.
I know. Turning water into blood. And
I'll tell you them and not make
good.
you
And
suffer.
there are more. But I don't want to say them all because I just don't want other people
To feel bad.
Yeah, I don't want people to think I'm like trying to show off how smart I am. So go ahead.
Well, okay, so there's water turns to blood. There's the frogs, the lice, the flies, the disease to the livestock, boils, hail and fire, the locusts, and the darkness, and then the death of the firstborn. But I was thinking this, what plague would have been enough for you to listen to God? Because I honestly feel like as soon as his staff turned to a snake, I'd be out. I'd be like, I'll listen. I'm good. I don't care if that was black magic. I'm out. Whatever I need to do. What do you think? What plague? Actually, let's do this. What modern day plague? You have to make it modern. A modern day plague that would get you to do what God wants you to do.
So you're saying like turn my iPhone into a viper?
Yeah.
Yeah, it would get me to pay attention really quick.
I was thinking modern day plagues would be more like everyone's eyebrows fall off. Women would wake up and be like, let the people go. Or like every woman with breast implants, they're deflated when they wake up.
Bye-bye, Cydni.
Back to my early 20s. And then I thought recently we had cellular service went down.
Right.
Yeah, I was like, is that the first plague? I was like, why is my phone saying SOS? I'm scared. I'm going to pray just in case. But what I really want to know is, how did 10 plagues happen? That's a real question. After one or two, wouldn't you be like, I don't want to play this game anymore?
So water turned to blood. That's horrifying.
That is so scary.
I'm thinking of it in modern times. You turn on your tap water and blood comes out.
Right.
I'm out.
I
I'm
would
listening.
be terrified.
And the frogs, I'd be like, okay, weird frogs. But lice, that is horrible. Speaking as a teacher, let me tell you, lice is a dreadful thing. I'd be out on that one too.
Yeah. I just wonder, how were their hearts that hard that they had to go through all of those 10? It blows my mind a little bit.
In the Old Testament, there are 87 miracles, and that didn't work either.
That's true. So the point here is, we can't have such a hard heart that we ourselves would have to go through 10 plagues. But as I think about that, I think of how hard the last few years have been. And maybe they're like, hey, wake up, Sid, wake up. But anyway, that was way off of anything I was planning on saying. So welcome back. I'm going to tell you a few of the things that I learned. One thing Morgan Freeman talked about, he said that the Passover meal is a celebration of the bond the Jews feel with God. And it's used to teach the children so that they can understand the tradition and their faith. And I loved that so much. One of the reasons why I loved that is I think we so easily forget very spiritual moments. And they keep the tradition alive, that they talk about it, that they talk about the miracles that took place to free the people. Something that was said was, this woman talked about that there were many miracles. One of the miracles was the parting of the Red Sea, but the other was closing of the Red Sea. And she said that they have to acknowledge, and God wants us to remember, that the Egyptians are just as much his sons as we are. So what they do is they place some of their wine on their plate during the Passover. And it's a symbol of drops of sorrow, that God had lost so many of his children while saving so many of his other children. And I thought that was so beautiful.
I did not know that. It really, to me, it just touches my heart, especially when you think about we're all God's children. I love that. That is so beautiful.
I thought so too, because it's acknowledging the power of God. And because of the miracles, they took it as a sign that they were his chosen people. But it's acknowledging that the Egyptians were also his children. The forgiveness and the love and the lesson taught to the children. I thought that, since he mentioned that the Passover dinner was to help the youth understand the tradition and their faith, but it also takes time to illustrate it wasn't an enemy. They were also his children. That's beautiful. I loved that. I loved learning that. And Morgan Freeman shared a quote that is, divine will is not easy to understand. And I thought that was really interesting, because I reflected on how many times our prayers are not answered, how many times the miracle we want doesn't happen. While I was listening, the question came to me, who doesn't sometimes think, okay, but I had the faith, I believed, and it didn't happen. And the thought came to me, what if the miracle is not what you wanted, but the miracle is actually acceptance of God's will? The miracle is that you found peace even when your prayer was not answered. What if that's the miracle? Because I think of people who've had great losses and disasters who have accepted it. If you think about it, that is a miracle, to accept something you absolutely do not want. It's a complete miracle to feel peace and love from God when you don't get what you really wanted, especially if it was a pure and good desire.
I love that, because when you are going through trials and tribulation and you have that peace, that is a miracle. And if we look for those signs that God's hand is really guiding and helping us, start there. If you've gone through something difficult, but yet you still felt peace and calm, that is a miracle. And that is literally God creating an extraordinary event. That is exactly what he's doing by bringing that peace and calm to your heart.
Yeah, sometimes a change of heart is a miracle. So then that would lead us to the next thought that would make this more personal. And it is more personal stories in our own life or throughout history that have touched your heart, like Titus, who had such a personal story that became so real to him. Do you have a story like that?
Well, of course, since you opened the door for history, I'm going to have to go there, because one of my very absolute favorite miracle stories occurred during the American Revolution. And it was the Battle of Long Island. General Washington had 8,000 Americans versus 32,000 British. The British trapped Washington and those 8,000 American soldiers against the East River. I want you to imagine a river at least a mile wide, and they're trapped against the river with the British around them on all three sides. The plan was the British were going to bring in the Navy and have the Navy go up behind them on the river so that they would be completely surrounded. But before that could happen, a terrible storm came in. And the storm was so bad that it actually prevented the British naval ships from going up behind the Americans. And so with this little opening, George Washington sent the American troops up and down the river in both directions, had people sneak out, and they were asking for boats just from regular Americans along the river and saying, the soldiers are trapped, we need your help. And they just started bringing in boats like crazy. As soon as it started to get dark, the Americans started their escape across the river. And remember, it's a really bad storm. So very large naval boats couldn't get up the river and were going across in little rowboats. So it was very difficult and everything was so hard. And then suddenly at about 11 p.m., all of a sudden the storm cleared up and the wind was perfect, blowing those rowboats perfectly across the river. So they just kept going across and hurrying, getting the soldiers across as quickly as they could. While this was going on, one of the houses that the soldiers went to looking for rowboats to help them escape across the river was a British loyalist family. And the British loyalist family sent their servants to go and tell the British Army what the Americans were doing. So the servants went into the British camp, but they didn't run into British soldiers. They ran into Hessian soldiers who are German. The Hessians were hired by the British to help fight the war, but they only spoke German. The Hessians couldn't understand a word the servants were saying, but they were the only ones on duty in that area, and so they just held them there. It wasn't until just before the sun came up that British soldiers came that could speak English and found out what was going on. So the Americans are still escaping. But the sun was getting ready to come up, and all the Americans hadn't escaped across to the other side yet. It was getting a little intense for the people that were there. Were like, oh, we are going to get slaughtered as soon as the sun comes up. We are all dead. But just before the sun came up, a very thick fog rolled in. And the fog rolls in and it covered the British and the American encampment. And several American soldiers wrote about this in their journal. Some of them said we could only see out about 10 yards or 6 yards. And some of them said I couldn't even see out the length of my hand. And so this had a huge impact. That fog coming in at the perfect time really impacted the soldiers. I just wanted to read one of the American soldiers. This is from Major Benjamin Talmadge. He said, as the dawn of the next day approached, those of us who remained in the trenches became very anxious for our own safety. And when the dawn appeared, there were several regiments still on duty. At this time, a very dense fog began to rise, and it seemed to settle in a peculiar manner over both encampments. I recollect this peculiar providential occurrence perfectly well. And so very dense was the atmosphere that I could scarcely discern a man at 6 yards distance. Meanwhile, going back to those servants that had been captured, when finally the British soldiers got there and found out what was going on, they rushed to go find out what's happening, and they saw that the Americans were evacuating. So they went and told the rest of the British soldiers they were just getting ready to attack, and the fog lifted. So the fog is lifting. It looks like, oh, we're going to get those Americans. And the fog lifted just in time for them to see the last boat reach the shore on the other side. I love that story, and it is just an absolute miracle. One of my favorite history books was written by historian David McCullough, and he wrote the book 1776, and this is what he said about the event. Incredibly, yet again, circumstances, fate, luck, providence, the hand of God, as would be said so often, intervened. And I just love that story because for me, it's a testimony builder that having agency and choice is from God.
That was amazing. I need fog to appear when my children are trying to walk upstairs to wake me up at night.
And then a fog rolled into the house.
I was going to go wake you up at 1 a.m. again, Mom, but there was a fog. I couldn't find the stairs.
I had to go back to bed.
I'll be like, go to bed, honey.
Maybe
God is real.
Yep. Maybe that will happen for you tonight. Okay, what about you? What have you got?
I think everyone should spend time reflecting on miracles in their life because as I was doing this, I actually thought of something that I never had considered as a miracle until I spent time pondering on miracles. And at first I started thinking of the obvious things. And then something came to my mind that I have never considered as a miracle until the preparation for this. And when I was in the hospital with Iana and I had placenta previa, which caused great blood loss, one of the worst parts about that was you feel like a ticking time bomb. So many times I'd stand up and blood would gush out.
Ooh, TMI.
Is that a trigger warning situation? I don't know. It was difficult though, because I started to feel really anxious and fearful every time I needed to stand up. And I started having dreams of it happening, and it would happen right before it would actually happen. Now, I know this sounds crazy. This is probably why I didn't consider this a miracle. But one of the things I took to prayer was how scary it was to feel like I didn't know what was going to happen. It was completely out of my control. And upon reflection, I now see that I would have dreams every single time before it would happen, as if God was answering my prayer that, hey, I can't stop this from happening, but here's a little heads up. And I got to the point from this would happen 10 times, the beginning of feeling so scared and almost paralyzed in fear, to then I would wake up, I had the dream. I would sit on my hospital bed for a minute and I would say to myself, I know what's going to happen. And then it would happen. And upon reflection, I see that God did give me some control, and that is a miracle. Explain that. How would maybe somebody out there is like, I could explain it. Let me grab my crystal ball. But when I reflected on this, I thought of a few things. One, he didn't give me the answer that I wanted, which was that it would stop and I could go home.
To go away, yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to just be healed, and I wanted to just go home with my kids and my husband. I didn't get that for a long time. But what I did get was, hey, this part of this situation that's bothering you the most, here's a little heads up. I'm going to give you a dream. I'm going to prepare you. And it happened all the way to the end. I remember a Sunday night that I had a dream that an emergency C-section was happening. And I woke up and I had an emergency C-section. I thought, so often we don't get the answer that we want. And I also thought, how crazy. When I say this now, it's like almost obvious. What a tender mercy. Terrible, not fun, nothing I would recommend. But the chances of having a dream before it would happen was, I did not see that as a miracle or a blessing. I just felt like I was in a terrible situation and the whole thing sucked and I didn't want to be part of it. And I thought to myself, how often do we not see things as a miracle when it is a miracle? That, hey, Sid, this is what's absolutely driving you the most crazy. I'm going to help you out a little bit. And it's really easy, I believe, to not see God's hand in your life because he's giving you an answer that you weren't wanting, but he is giving you an answer that will help you.
That is such a great example, because sometimes we look at it as the miracle should be take away the tribulation or the trial or whatever it is out of our life. Just fix it. That should be the miracle. But in reality, God's going to give us a miracle in a way that's going to help us learn and grow and will help us get through it. God is always there if you ask. And that's what happened. God didn't take away your trial, but God helped you get through it. He helped lift that weight off your shoulders that you were carrying and said, you know what, if this is what's really bugging you, I can help you get through it, because you turned to him and you asked.
Right. And I think sometimes we are so focused on our questions not being answered the way we want that we miss the miracle.
Right. And this leads us right into the next question, which is, what can we do to bring miracles into our life now? Elder Ronald Rasband said, what should you be looking for in your own life? What are God's miracles that remind you that he is close, saying, I'm right here? Think of those times, some daily, when the Lord has acted in your life and then acted again. Treasure them as moments the Lord has shown confidence in you and in your choices, but allow him to make more of you than you can make of yourself on your own. Treasure his involvement. And that is exactly what you did. As you were talking, it made me think of an experience that I had when I was in ICU with my stroke. I know that I've talked about tender mercies after my stroke, but this is one I didn't mention. I had people in the room, family, friends in the ICU with me, and I just really wanted to go to sleep. And there kind of became an argument over who was going to stay with me. And I was like, please everyone go home. I have 2 nurses. I just want to go to sleep. And so everyone left, and I thought I would just fall asleep and I would feel better the next day. And instead of falling asleep, I just couldn't get out of my head. I was like, I cannot believe that this just happened. And that's all I could think about in my head. And I wasn't falling asleep. So I decided to listen to something on my phone. And I literally just grabbed my phone and I just hit play on my podcast. And they were having a guest on the show. And when the guest came on, it was one of my friends. I had no idea she was going to be on this podcast, but there she was just talking away. For me, it was such a blessing to have a friendly voice, somebody that knew me as I was trying to fall asleep. And I was like, what are the chances? When I got out of ICU and I texted her and I just was like, thank you. It was such a blessing. Well, she did this podcast months in advance. It was like 3 or 4 months before. So for me, just from my own perspective, from my own little miracle, God was working on this 3 months before I had my stroke. And I found such comfort in that. And going back to the miracle with the Americans escaping across the East River, for me personally, sometimes I don't see the miracle until my back is up against the river. And then when a trial happens, I have a stroke, whatever, then, oh, look at all these miracles. But I think what our Elder Razband is saying is look for those little miracles every single day. That's what I should be doing, is looking for those miracles where God is saying that, hey, I'm close, I'm right here. Wouldn't it be great if we did that when things were going well and not just when our backs were up against the wall? Because I do that all the time. I need to be focused on what God is doing for me daily, and not just what God is doing for me when I'm having trials or tribulations. So I guess the question is, how do we not just notice the miracles when our back is up against the wall, but how do we recognize those miracles each and every single day? And how do we bring those miracles into our lives?
I was reading the Bible dictionary about miracles, and something I really loved is miracles were and are a response to faith. They were never wrought without prayer, felt need, and faith. What that means to me is that sometimes I feel like our back is against the wall in the worst kind of way because God wants us to be right there. He wants our back to be against the wall so that we'll go on our knees. The most fervent prayer I have offered recently was when my kids have been so sick after traveling, and my daughter was so sick that I just felt entirely helpless watching her. And I prayed harder in that Instacare waiting for a doctor to see her than I have prayed all year. Why? Because my back was against the wall. I would love to say I pray like that all of the time just because, but I don't. I easily forget to kneel down and turn my casual prayer into a fervent prayer. So we are against the wall so that we can see God's hands. And so I really love that it says miracles were and are a response to faith. Everything starts with faith. And President Nelson gives a talk and he says, it is our faith that unlocks the power of God in our life. The Lord does not require us to have perfect faith to have access to his perfect power, but he does ask us to believe. When I was listening to the Morgan Freeman episode, something interesting was that he asked her, how does she feel about modern day miracles? And I was a little surprised her answer was, well, I don't believe someone's going to part the Red Sea for us now. I was kind of surprised by that. I wondered, but why? Why would we believe in a God who could and did part the Red Sea and did perform 87 miracles? Why would he not perform more miracles? Then I thought, well, it's probably because we don't need the Red Sea parted right now. What we need is different and probably more personal. Do we need wine and bread?
I think you've already mentioned the answer is yes on that.
The answer is yes. But really, do we need some of the miracles that took place in the Bible to happen right now? Most of them, no, it's the personal ones that I think we relate to more. It's the reaching out to touch a robe to be healed of what is going on in your life. It's, as President Nelson talks about, it's your own personal mountain that needs to be moved. Do we need to move a mountain out in our beautiful view? Not really. It doesn't need to move. But do we need to move a mountain in our own personal life that is before us, whether it's loneliness or illness or just unanswered prayers? I would say yes. Those are the miracles. So her answer of, I don't think he's going to part the Red Sea, I say, I do believe he could. I believe that he could part the Red Sea. But in believing that, then I better believe that he can move a mountain before me. I better believe that the God that I worship and love can move mountains in my own personal life, because believing is the key President Nelson goes on to list 4 ways to bring miracles into your life. One is to study, become an engaged learner, know the doctrine of Christ, make it personal, learn about miracles and trust his will and his timing. Second, believe. Take all of your questions to God. I love that he said, don't have doubts, don't have questions. He says, take your questions to God. The third one, act in faith. He then suggests, do something now that requires faith. And I loved that. The final one is ask for help. He says, faith takes work. And then this came to my mind. I thought when my kids were sick, I was very passionate about searching Google for answers. I was aggressively putting in their symptoms. I was reading all these articles, looking up like, what could they have? Do they have COVID? Do they have the flu? Do they have, all the things that are around us right now? And I was trying so desperately to find an answer. And then I asked myself, when is the last time I put that much energy into a spiritual question? Or have I just brushed it off? Because I tell you, when my kids have been sick or there's been a weird bump on someone's back, I am on Google and I'm trying to find an answer. And I thought, but what about times that I've had a question about my beliefs or a doctrinal question? Do I get in there? Do I take my questions to God? Do I ask for help? Do I ask? And then he says, ask and then ask again. I feel like I put more energy into a Google symptom situation than I do with, I don't understand this. And I think that probably should be changed.
Yeah, I think that's good advice for me as well. I think I do the same thing. I'm looking for answers to questions that probably aren't as important.
One final thing that President Nelson said, seek and expect miracles. God said, I am a God of miracles, and he means it.
4 final thoughts. This week, Cydni and I really wanted to learn about miracles. And we learned that miracles are extraordinary events caused by the power of God. And we want to choose to see and treasure God's involvement through the power of his miracles in our life. If we want more of God's involvement in our life, President Nelson gave us some really good advice. He said to study, believe, act in faith, ask God for help, and then ask again. Then seek and expect miracles.
And Albert Einstein said, there are only 2 ways to live your life. One is though nothing is a miracle. The other is as though everything is a miracle. Our challenge is for you to lean into believing that everything is a miracle and to find simple daily miracles in your own life. So we both took this challenge and we both decided to see everyday things as a miracle and share one. You want to go first?
Sure. So the other day I needed to go somewhere just as it was getting dark, and I don't see very well anyway, but especially at night. I have contacts that I wear, but I have glasses that help me see at night. And so I was getting ready to walk out the door, and I just thought, you know what? It's starting to get dark, so I really should probably put on my glasses. And then I was like, but I want to take out my contacts because I'm not going far. But I decided to go get my glasses anyway. I put on my glasses, and I got in my little truck, and I started to drive away, and a kid ran out in front of me. So I slammed on my brakes, and the kid went running across the street. And then I went like 2 blocks, and a grown man ran out in front of me, and I had to slam on my brakes again. So I was just so grateful for that moment that I actually listened to the Spirit, and then I got to see the miracle from that, because that doesn't happen all the time, but I definitely saw it that day, and I'm so grateful that everyone was okay.
So the miracle is a female driver not causing an accident? Wah, wah, wah.
That's right.
Okay, mine is actually inspired by my friend because she just told me this little miracle in their life because their 6-year-old son plays baseball and he has a favorite bat, and the father and her son went and played baseball together at the park and they lost the bat. And it was heartbreaking for this little guy. It was also heartbreaking for her because she said it was the right weight, and I don't know what weight bats are, so I have no idea how I'm going to go get another one and get the right one. It will be a miracle buying the right bat. And she thought, why don't I just go back and look? They looked, they could not find it. But she said they woke up, they decided to go back to the park, and her little son said, I think we should say a prayer. And she said, I will tell you that I've never prayed more fervently as a mom. You just want their little prayer answered, but it was so out of reach. And she said, while he prayed, she prayed and said, please answer his little prayer. And they looked around the park and they couldn't find it. So they got back in the car and said, sorry, buddy, I don't think we're going to find it. And then something told her, go ask that man over there. And she didn't even see a man. She looked up and there was someone working. And she saw also a shed that she didn't notice before. So she thought, I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to go ask him if he saw a bat. And she walked over there and he said, I'm not the right guy to ask, but maybe that guy over there is. Then she saw another guy, went and asked him. He also said, sorry, not the right guy. But there is someone driving right there that could be the right guy to ask. Sure enough, he said, yeah, I have a key to the shed. Let's go look. And there they found the bat.
Yay.
They cheered and cheered and cheered. And then her little son on his own said the most beautiful little gratitude prayer. So following the spirit and prayers answered that are so meaningful to maybe only us or a 6-year-old, that to me is a beautiful miracle.
That made my heart so happy.
This week, we challenge you to live as though everything is a miracle and choose to see the miracles in your life.
This is our prayer
From Cydni and Sher. Have a great week.
I'm forging my way through the tip-tip-top. I'm living my life through the drip-drip-drop. When eternity's plan, I just can't stop. I'm making my way through the drip-drip-drop.
Dude, a miracle is an extra. We said this. We're like, how do you say this?
we both are
We're not going to mess up. We're going to get it right the first time. All right. Isn't there like jaw exercises like unique New York? We should start doing that. Unique New York. You do it.
I don't want to do it.
Unique New York. How did we decide to say it?
We both say extraordinary. It's extraordinary.
Hicks. You were going to go first. It's on my notes
I'm going to go first.
Our outline.
I wrote that too.
Follow
All
our
right.
outline.
I know. I'm sorry.
Why do I always have to be a teacher around here?
I know it.
Is it always about just me?
All right.
Sometimes it's about other people.
Sometimes, but usually not.
Thanks. I was in a total groove. Just kidding. I wasn't. What's in that Gatorade bottle? They're in wine. I'm going to write. I'm going to write in my sand.
Mind your own
wine
business,
out of a Gatorade
Cydni.
bottle. Cast the first stone. Share. I'll start over one more time. I got so distracted with my own jokes. Again.
Are we good?
We're good.
Okay.
We're so good. We're freaking
We're
so
good.
good, Cher. A miracle. Google's like, screw you. You want to say that? Then I'm going to take away your quote that you found here on me. Doesn't matter. Found it.
Oh, me. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm bossing
quit.
you around.